Okay, for this edition of Record Store Recon, we of course have Dr. Disc, who your name's blown, man. You're not anonymous anymore. You're Alan Brostow. And a
The
special
mask is
guest,
off.
Rev from the Drowns.
It's
Hey, Rev, how
great
are you
to
doing?
see you guys again. I'm good, man. I'm really good. I'm home for a little bit, so
And Rev did the new issue, Goldmine's new issue. You did a guest, you were the guest reviewer for Record Store Recon,
yeah, man, that was awesome. Thank you guys for letting me do that.
Georgetown Records. So you were very good because you asked the reader questions back, like, asking what they would like as far as like a clean store or I love the part where you said that you'd ask the clerk and what was like the clerk would ignore you or they'd be on the phone or something like that. Uh,
Yeah.
and you just hated that.
Oh, it's
Um,
that's my pet peeve. We're going into a record store. It's like, well, I mean, I guess any business, if you think about it, though, it's like, what are you there to do? Are you there to like hang out and look cool, or are you there to sell records? You know what I mean? It's like, it's it's like if someone came up to my merch booth and I didn't talk to them, but they wanted to buy a T-shirt, it would just make no sense. You know what I mean? But I think what's worse for me is when the staff is negative, and I don't run into it too often, to be totally honest. Nowadays, I feel like in Seattle, maybe in the late '90s, it was a lot different, but back in the day, you'd walk in and someone would, you'd have a copy of an album you had been waiting for, and they would be like, "Why are you buying that?" And you're just like, "Oh, come on, dude! What are you doing? Like, you can't, music taste is subjective, so you can't do that."
it's like the movie,
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Just don't ask for Debbie Gibson.
right? I
Oh,
might
careful,
test that
Alan.
out one time.
You're gonna have all
Well,
those Debbie Gibson fans coming after you.
I want to remind everybody listening that not only does Rev play with the Drowns, which as I'll share later when I share my top 10 list, put out an absolute amazing album last year. But he himself is a very passionate record collector and had the opportunity to take the whole band shopping when they came through Chicago on their most recent tour, and just could see the passion of all four members of the band when it really came time to shopping. And so this is the first guest we've had to a record store recon for us since I've been doing these for over like 11 or 12 years. And so Rev just sold me on the idea of talking about Georgetown Records because I unfortunately can't get out to Seattle right now as much as I would like to. And so, maybe take us through the store. What do you love so much about that store?
Well, I mean, I've always loved record stores in general. And I feel like I can always find something. Like you said, I'm a avid collector, so I feel like I can always find something I like about a record store. Um, and in my early 20s, when I moved to Georgetown, that neighborhood in South Seattle, it's like a working class, very like, but also very artsy neighborhood. Um, I was a young guy in a neighborhood full of like older artists, so older musicians and people who had been in the neighborhood for a long time, painters and like graphic artists and people who make sculptures who were all drastically older than me. And in my early 20s, I wanted nothing but to be accepted by that community because that's where I lived and that's the people that I admired. And that record store became a hub for conversation and there's a coffee shop next door called All City Coffee that a friend of mine owns and I actually worked at in my 20s for a long time too, and everyone would do the same thing every morning. You'd get coffee, you'd go to the record store, you'd hang out, you'd talk about new albums, you'd talk about old albums you love. You'd go to the owner and you'd go, "Why don't you carry this?" And he would give you, like, well, I haven't because of this, but I'll order it. And it was these little conversations and interactions that truly like built my personality in a lot of ways in my early 20s. It helped me kind of focus all the things that I cared about when it came to collecting records into one kind of like I don't know how to say it. Like it's the experience I always crave now. I it was so welcoming and so fun and so like community based. And in my opinion, that record shop is still like that. If you walk in tomorrow, as I tried to paint in the review, if one of you guys walked in and you had something specific you wanted to talk to the owner Martin about, he would talk to you about it for hours. As long as you wanted to talk about it, he would talk about it. And he's always so open to conversation and so open to criticism when it comes to like what he carries in the store, and he wants to hear those things. And I feel like that's something I don't get at every record store.
Is he so he opened it in 2004, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
And it's been how did he do during the COVID period? Did you visit it during that period?
No, well, when I could, I did. But he was down for a bit. Luckily, there's like multiple people who are kind of involved financially, and if anything had happened, the community would have come together to help him out. One upside and downside, I think, depending on your view on it, is that they don't sell records online, and they're very adamant about that because they want to keep that experience. They want to keep people coming in and they want to keep you talking about it. You know what I mean? And so I think during COVID that probably would have helped, but they stuck to their guns and they're like, no, we're a record store for a reason. So I really admire that too.
Now we were joking about staff. You said their staff is pretty cool, right?
Yeah,
So if I walked in and asked for a Debbie Gibson album, they'd show me where it was.
I guarantee they would be like, well, we don't know if we have that, but here's some other suggestions. And they would probably give you like, yeah, they're pretty good about being like, here's an artist that's similar, but here's a modern artist that's similar. Or if you like Debbie Gibson, maybe you should check out, this artist. They're pretty great about it. So they'll probably judge you in their own head, but they won't say it out loud.
Right. Or I could
And
say
I'm sure
help.
I'm sure they'd say if you like the vocal sounds of Debbie Gibson, you need to check out the new Drowns album because
So,
Rev can sing just like Debbie can.
Or I'll
we
go in
know,
and say,
we know
help, I'm
this
a
guy.
Debbie Gibson fan. Can you turn me on to a modern band?
Like we know this guy with a red beard who sounds exactly like her. Oh man.
How's their inventory? Is it mostly alternative? Is it rock or everything? A little bit of everything.
It's a little bit of everything. I would say when it comes to like modern stuff, that's like there's a lot of modern punk, there's a lot of modern rock and roll, but when it comes to a lot of represses, you're not going to necessarily have the best choice of like modern modern represses or modern like you're not going to how do I describe that? You're not going to walk in and find um like a Killers repress. Like you're probably not going to find that. You know what I mean? That's just not what they buy. So like when these major labels are like reprinting a bunch of albums from like the 2000s and stuff, you're probably not going to find like a Taking Back Sunday record in there.
Right.
But there's a huge wealth of like rock and roll, classic rock, punk, ska, country, the blues. Their jazz section is really great. There's some singer-songwriter stuff. They have a lot of old soundtracks. I love that skimming that section and seeing what I can find in there. But he also tries to be like their a lot of their inventory comes in as lots. So someone will contact him and he'll go buy the lot. Um, and then recently he found like he started buying Martin started bringing in some like African based music uh, like imports. And then that community in Seattle found out by word of mouth that they could get it there. So there's a lot of like African based music. There's a lot of like Jamaican music and Haitian music and these random records that he just saw that there was an audience. So he kept purchasing imports from there. And so he also has a crazy selection of like world music.
Hmm.
Yeah, and then a lot of the stuff, like I said, he buys lots, so a lot of it is random in a lot of ways too, because he's just trying to go like he buys the lot and goes, well, someone's definitely going to want this, and throws it on the shelf.
Or he puts stuff in the dollar section, which I love, by the way. I love that the bigger the cheap record section, the more I'm into it.
Yeah, yeah. I'll send you a photo of theirs because it's huge.
Only because it's one of the things I want to spend time with because, I have a record player instead of besides my stereo system, and I want to put cheap records on it, and just because I'm curious or whatever. A lot of times, buy them because of the crazy album covers or You,
Mhm.
you never know what you're going to find in there besides, Frank Sinatra and Dean Martin or, whatever. But it could be a really pretty interesting section. So do they have one of those?
They do, yeah. It's huge too. Yeah, it's
Good.
large. Yeah, I'll send you a photo. It's a ton of albums. You can usually, and it's funny because you'll find certain stuff and then they don't end up putting out on the shelves, but like that someone would definitely want, like like an old beat up Dean Martin record or something is going to end up there. They're
Right.
like, it's not the best quality, but it's still a great album.
Like I said, I'll put it on my, when I take my remote record player somewhere, I put on a record that's kind of beat up, because I know it doesn't matter.
Yeah,
Those record players are kind of cheap, they're affordable, and I think it's kind of a fun part of record collecting, to get that stuff. What about do they have like collector's editions of like, albums that are hard to find on the wall? Record stores do that a lot now. They put if they have like a what they consider their gold, they'll put it on the wall and say, this Beatles album for, $200 or whatever, this
yeah.
Rolling Stones album.
They
Yep.
do, but it's funny because it's not your normal like it's not like this like cool like it's like a Stones record. It's not like that. It's like I remember I was in there like 2 years ago and there was an old weird like Halloween sound effects like
Oh
record from like
yeah.
the 1970s.
Is
That
that
was
Alfred
awesome.
Hitchcock?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And it
Yeah,
was
I
just on
have
the
that. Yeah, that's
wall.
good.
And I was like, man, so my wife collects old like vintage Halloween stuff. So she
Hey,
she grabbed
that's a
that.
good one.
But it's always these like very eclectic choices. Like it's I mean, granted, if they have like, like they have Beatles box sets and stuff behind the counter, things like that, but it's it's always something to spark interest more than what they think would sell. I think if that makes sense.
And
It's more like something that's easier to have a conversation about.
I noticed that they're open every day, which is sometimes unusual for a record store, The record store owners like to take a day off. I notice a lot of
Yeah.
times Monday.
Yeah,
Um,
they only have like three staff too, so I don't know how they do it.
wow. Is it
But
in
I
a
was gonna
good,
say
is it in like a cultural neighborhood? Like you could walk around and do things, or is it,
it is, yeah, it is, but it's smaller.
yeah, I'm looking at an old photo and it looked like a sort of factory district.
Yeah,
Um,
it's actually directly across the street from the old Rainier Brewery where they used to make Rainier beer for
oh,
like
nice.
almost for like 100 years.
That's pretty cool. So it's a kind of like a landmark that people in Seattle would know.
Absolutely. No, that whole neighborhood too is well known as being like this like very industrial but very like artsy and like it's actually a quick story when I moved there in my 20s, my grandmother who's from out here was like, "Are you okay?" And I was like, "Am I okay?" And she's like, "Yeah, only people with problems move to Georgetown because it was so like rough and cheap to live there." But I was like, "No, Grandma, I'm an artist. I need cheap rent. Like I don't make a lot of money."
And they emphasize on their website they buy 45s and as well and 12-inch singles, but not 78s, they emphasize. Nor CDs or DVDs.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh
So I
man.
guess the only CDs they carry are from local musicians, which Alan likes to check on every store to see if they stock up. They got you guys in there, right? They got the drown.
Yeah. Yeah, a ton. Yeah, they buy a good amount from pirates of our stuff, and it's a cool place for me to be able to be like if someone's traveling in Seattle and they're like, "Hey, are you guys playing?" And I'm like, "No, we're not playing, but if you want to check out a cool record store that carries our stuff, go check this place out." And I know they always have it. And also, Martin has carried music I've made since I was in my early 20s, so he's been selling my CDs and records since for 20 years now. So I definitely owe that guy for that. It was if someone would go in there and they'd ask for something local, he would suggest that and just always stocked it. And that's super cool because no other record store was really doing that. So
They never carried CDs though,
only well because I was local. That was
huh?
why.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's interesting because some places that don't carry CDs will carry the box sets that have CDs, but nothing else.
Oh yeah,
Only
they try to stay
album.
away from the individual ones.
Yeah.
So
Hey, so
I
I
was
oh go ahead.
I was just gonna say, just really quick to touch back on the dollar bins real quick. I remember, I think it was when Neil showed up to the record store we were at in Chicago that Doc took us to. Neil was like, "Where are they?" And we were all lower, but under the shelves in the dollar bins that were underneath the shelves. So you like couldn't see any of the band because immediately that's where we all went.
Yeah, they did. They dove right in. So I'm anxious to ask Rev if you don't mind, because you just came back from a big European tour. Um, did you hit any record stores while you were over in Europe, and or do you try and stay away because hey, to try and bring that stuff back is real difficult?
Well, that's a good question. Like people don't think about that, right? They don't think about how much like you have in your suitcase, and if you're over a certain amount of weight, which vinyl unfortunately is heavy, um, you could tip the scales and it ends up being $100 to bring your suitcase back home on top of what you're already paying. We do try to hit record stores. On this one, it was so busy we didn't really have time. Um, Part of the good thing and the bad thing about us touring Europe, though, is that our tour manager Maria, she and her husband own a record store called Steeltown Records in East Germany, and so more often than not, I just kind of ask her for things that I see online in their in their library, and I'm like, hey, like, could you just bring this so that way I don't have to go necessarily to get it if we don't have time. But we do try to hit record stores, and we're touring the U.S. here with our friends the Coffin Cats in February, and the U.S. tours we end up having more time, so we absolutely will be hitting record stores, and we're not paying for luggage, so we'll bring it right back home. And usually we actually have an egg crate, for 12 inches in the van that the whole band uses commutatively, and then at the end we take what we bought out of it.
That's pretty awesome.
Yeah, I mean we're just always on the look.
Like I said, Pat, this is a band that is truly committed to vinyl.
Yeah.
And I am very excited that I just found out that the first, correct me if I get this wrong, Rev, but the very first Drowns album is going to be reissued by Pirates Press. Plus, it's got some additional things to it. Is that correct?
Yeah, yeah, totally, man. That was such a crazy thing that Pirates approached us about. When we first made this band, Andy and Jake and I we had done other projects that had kind of come to an end or were starting to kind of fizzle out, and we were very like motivated to get something going, but had nothing. And so we booked two tours and we went on these tours just to stop in Sacramento at our friend's recording studio and work on this record so we could get something. That was the goal. Get something out that we can tour on. It really wasn't even like we have to record a record. It was like we need something so we can get more tour dates. And we recorded the first album, and we actually did end up pitching it to Pirates back in the day, but we didn't really have a relationship with them yet. They didn't really know who we were, even as people or anything. So we ended up attempting to put it out on our own. Jake and I made a small record label called 1984 just to put out this record, and then we had some friends who helped us out, and so we put out what we could, but it was a very limited pressing. Like I think in the U.S. there was maybe like 1,000, like maybe, and it's been out of press here for years. And then a label in Germany, our friends Gunner Records, they put it out over there, and they did a ton of legwork for years pushing that album and getting it around. When the first time we toured Europe, tons of people knew those songs, which was wacky because we were already on another full length at that point. So we'd be playing these songs and people would come up and be like, why don't you play Where's Bobby? And I'd be like, the song off the first record? Like what? Are you kidding? But that was the record that had been rotated over there the most. So we were excited when Pirates was like, hey, you never had a legit press of this in the US. Let's do it. And then they pitched doing new art, which we had new art done, which is beautiful and gorgeous, which we're super excited about. And there's like a die cut in the opening. Like we're nerds, right? So we we wanted to make sure there's something special with the art and doing something that's not just like we press the same cover and put it out. Um, like on the last album, I was adamant when we made Blacked Out. I was adamant about the Blacked Out being embossed. The label was like, "Hey man, it's like black on black. Like it's gonna be." I was like, "No, I want it embossed. I want people to touch it. I want something textile on the cover. um, so they did it, and it turned out awesome. I was right. But with this one, there's like a die cut, and they used similar themes of the art from the original record, but just redid it in this new cool fashion. And then we did at that same time we had recorded a cover of a 7 Seconds song during those sessions, and we just had it laying around. Like the guys from 7 Seconds are good friends of ours, and when Jake and I were in other bands back in the day, we both toured with 7 Seconds, and we loved them. And so we recorded that cover, but never did anything with it. So we added it to the album because it was done in the same session. So if you want to hear, this 7 Seconds cover from that we did 10 years ago from that same era, it's on there. And then we had the entire thing remastered by Jack and Dino, who was obviously famous for, all of the 90s like grunge bands and, the Nirvana records, obviously, and stuff. But Jack is a good friend and a beautiful connection to Seattle. So any way we can involve the city in it too, we will. And so having Jack remaster it just made it amazing.
About Georgetown, have the Drowns played a gig at the record store? Because they
We
do
recorded.
have live
We
band.
haven't done that yet, and we've talked to Martin about it. Like I guarantee we will at some point. Um, Honestly, I'm kind of waiting for I want to do a benefit of some sort to where we don't make any money, but we play the record store, and brings people in, and the money goes to charity. We've talked about it for years, so I'm sure it's going to happen. But we did record a music video in the record store. Um, the music video for Black Lung off of our album Under Tension. We recorded there, and that conversation was hilarious because I was just like, "Hey, Martin, can I record a music video?" And he was like, "Yes." like immediately was like, "Yeah, whatever you need." And then I was like, "Well, I want you to be in it," and he was like, "Sure." So in the record store, you actually like we're playing in the store, and Martin is just like surprised when people are coming in, but then is stoked that we're playing in the video, and so it was cool of him to like be into it and be into the idea.
How's the space for live performance? Is it downstairs or what's the space like in Georgetown?
They just roll the racks out of the way. Yeah,
What's that?
they just roll the racks out of the way.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so it's you're kind of in front of the door, but also there's enough space. They share the space with Fantagraphics Books,
Hmm.
which and they're completely split in half. So they are two separate things, like by a divided wall. But Fantagraphics Books, that sells like Love and Rockets and those old like you know uh, graphic novels. And Fantagraphics is cool about everything too, so they can always push stuff over to them. And like Larry, the owner of that place, is super rad, and so they can push the racks over if they need to. But a lot of their racks are there used to be a scooter shop in front of them, that sold like Vespas or like and worked on Vespas, and they would have these big, huge boxes that the Vespas would come in out of what do they call it, like polywood, or it's not plywood, but like this like pressed kind of like denser wood made from wood scraps. And they made a lot of the racks out of that, like for the records, and then they have wheels on the bottom of them, so they can just move them when they need to.
I notice. Do they sponsor or are they open during Record Store Day? Do you know any if they?
I know that they've been involved in the past, but I don't know how much they do, to be honest.
Hmm.
I'm not sure how much they involve themselves with that. Yeah, that'd be something I'd have to check with because I'm not sure. I would assume they do some, like I think, but I can't. To be honest, I can't remember whether I've just bought Record Store Day records that have ended up there, or whether they actually like ordered them. You know what I mean? Like I got like a Husker Du Record Store Day release from a few years ago from there, but I don't remember whether it was because they purchased it or it just came in. So
Rev doesn't have to shop for Record Store Day anymore. He just lets me know what he needs, and I try and get it for him.
man, dude, it's so funny. So this is a real. I know I feel like I'm rambling a lot, but real quick story. So I just got home from this tour, and Alan's been sending me so many fucking records that I see these two boxes, right? And when I just got home this last time, I see these two boxes and I open them, and there's a one of them's a Bronx record, and I'm like, what? The Bronx wasn't on my list, and Then one of them is it's another band. I don't remember what band, but it's two. Oh, it's Off with Their Heads, and it's two of their albums, like different colored vinyl. And I'm like, what? And I almost texted you, Alan, because I was like, why? I didn't put either of these bands on the list we've talked about. And it's like, yeah. And then I've now just assumed that every record that comes to my house is mine from Alan, like because so many have come. But actually, our agent in Germany, shout out to Stefan from City Rat. He's a huge vinyl collector too. Like his collection is massive, and he just sends albums to my house and has me bring them with next time I go on tour, so he can avoid shipping. So I now have to go like I have to look at the label and go, is this from Alan or not? Because that's how I know whether it's mine or not.
Do you have a favorite album that that you just bought?
Oh man, yeah, actually. So my wife and I we went to uh, we went to Silver Platters the other day, which is another like a bigger Seattle record store that's been around for a long time. And they used to do live performances when I was a kid. I went and saw a bunch of sets there. But so we went there the other day, and my wife is a huge Mort Garson fan. I don't know if you guys are like fans or not, but the like Moog synthesizer music, and Mort Garson did a lot of jingles back in the day, but he was this eccentric guy, super into like synthesizer music, and he was a composer, but also just enjoyed like his big album was Plantasia, which is music that he made all on a synthesizer, made for you to play for your plants, like like that you love and adore, and it's really cool. My wife's into a lot of that stuff, like Brian Eno, and like the she likes Tangerine Dream and these like kind of very synthesizery sounding bands and like synthesizer compositions. But so she's gotten me into it now, and so we actually found Mort Garson did the music, the live music for the moon landing. So when we landed on the moon in the 60s, like he did the music for that, and they finally pressed that on vinyl. So we got that the other day, and it's awesome. It's just like, it's one of those things where like you put it on, sit down with a cup of coffee, maybe read a book or something, and it just takes you to like you feel like you're in 2001: A Space Odyssey while you're listening to it.
You never know
So
what you might find, right? You're constantly turned on to what's this? Brian Johnson.
Brian Johnson promo edition, and it still has the hype sticker. Brian Johnson is currently the lead singer of AC/DC. This album was recorded during 1972 to 1980 when Brian Johnson was lead singer of Gordy. And
Wow.
I'd never seen this, and I'm a big fan of the Gold Steel promo, and
That's
so
awesome.
I had to pick it up. I haven't even listened to it yet, so
Where'd you get that gem?
I picked it up. You try to do something nice for your wife for her birthday, and so I took her to a 2-day spa and made sure that the spa was about 4 miles away from a record store. So while she was getting her spa treatment, I was shopping for vinyl. So it worked out for both of us.
Does she know that?
She does. She does. She encouraged it.
Hey, so uh, you stumbled onto like one of my favorite 70s bands. So Geordie, that band that Brian Johnson was in, is phenomenal. If you could find any, it's so good. It's very 70s, like kind of glammy. Um, and you could tell that it's him, but it's just way more poppy. And the band has a lot of those like kind of like the stomp clap 70s kind of breaks, like the very cheesy like sequin suit 70s glam. But it's super good, man. If you can find any Geordie, it's awesome.
All right. It sounds like I've got my next mission for Rev to come out a package.
Rev, you
So
might find
so
that
good.
in the mail.
Be, be,
Yes.
before we let Rev go, I do want to share because we actually have a record giveaway for
Nice.
our listeners for this episode. So I did my top 10 list, and I'm going to share it again right now, and this ties into our giveaway. So I'm going to read through the top 10 list first, and then I'll explain what our giveaway is going to be. But my number 10 album of the year is from a band called The Boy Detective, and that's their album Exhibition. Number 9 was Middle Cut, which self-titled, and that's we're going to have a giveaway for that. Number 8 was Piss Jeans, Half Divorced. Big fan of that
Love that
band.
band.
Number 7 was Burnt Milk Burnt Mill Ghosts with Old Record, and 6 was X's final album, Smoke and Fiction, which is a shame that they're going to be going out, but they're going out with a bang. Number 5, one of Rev's label mates, the 45 Adapters with
Yeah.
Unstoppable, was a great album, absolute great album.
They're great people too, man. That's such a good band, and they're so nice. And like, I think they're a really underrated band on that label. Like a lot of
Yep,
people haven't given them the time, which I don't understand. It's such a good band, and that record is really good.
yep. My number 4, Bad Nerves, Still Nervous. The number 3, which is probably my only really poppy album, was the Menzingers. Some of this was true.
Nice.
My number 2 album of the year, looking right across straight at Rev, The Drowns with Blacked Out. That album, Rev, I got to tell you, so many different styles of music. The cover songs that you put on there are phenomenal with Dynamo. It's such a great album. And my number 1 album, the Effigies Burned, which is a phenomenal album. So on that top 10 list, there are 4 albums that were from 2 labels. So obviously I said Revs, the Drowns, and 45 Adapters are both from Pirates Press. The Boy Detective and Middle Out are from a different label. And the first person who can tell me what label those 2 albums are on will win our Middle Out album that I will be happy to ship to you. You just need to respond to me on Instagram at doc_disc. So that's DOC_DISC. And the first person with the name of the label that both Boy Detective and Middle Out are on I will ship that to you, and I'll make sure it clearly has my name so you know who the heck is sending you these records.
Very
Man, thank you for saying those nice things about Blacked Out, man. I appreciate it. We're still so proud of that record, and it was so much fun to make that I'm glad that people liked it, man.
well, Rev.
I've,
Thank
I've,
you so much for doing the guest column of Record Store Recon and the fall issue.
I love what you guys do. And when I was at the record store the other day, I was at Silver Platters. We saw they sell old copies of Goldmine there, and I was like, man, I so adore what you guys do, and I'm glad it's still going. And I think there's a new amount of like life being breathed back into Goldmine that it's just a matter of time before it picks up even more. So thank you guys for letting me do that. Anytime you need anything, let me know. So I'm totally down.
Well,
Oh,
thanks.
wait, 2 seconds. I wore this shirt on purpose because, full disclosure, I thought we were meeting at 2 p.m. and I was in bed when Doc texted me. It was like, hey, I was like, oh no. So I threw this shirt on. This is Michael Caine and the Morning Afters. So if you don't know these guys, they're from Massachusetts, and they're a modern punk version of Bruce Springsteen, and they're phenomenal. So I just grabbed this shirt immediately and was like, okay, I got to let people know. If you guys haven't heard this band yet, they're friends of mine and they're phenomenal. They didn't ask me to do that. I just knew I was coming on today and was like, I'm going to wear my Michael Caine and the Morning After shirt. So
all
I wanted
right.
to slide that promo in for this band that I love.
I will definitely give it a listen. I'll definitely give it a listen.
Very cool. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you guys. Appreciate it.
And we hope to see you. Are you coming to the Northeast at all?
So we are. It's not announced yet. I can tell you when we're not recording, but yeah, later this year we will be out there. Yeah, exclusive. Later this year we will be out that way. So
Okay, great. We hope to see you on tour. Thanks, Rev.
And
absolutely,
Rev,
thank you guys.
I look forward to seeing you in a couple of weeks when you guys come to Milwaukee. I'm gonna definitely see you then.
Ah, cool. All right, man. And I got some details about all that. I'll text you too.
All right, man. Stay
Thanks
safe.
all.
Thanks, guys.